Hello, everyone. Welcome back to You Are What You Love.
Hi.
This is Ashley Quach.
Hi.
Ashley, let's dive into who you are a little bit. You are a children's book illustrator. You are a audio drama creator. You are a writer. You are a director. You are a stunning woman and a good friend of mine.
I'm disappointed that Stunning Woman wasn't first on the list.
I like to lead with your qualities.
My qualities.
Yeah.
My qualifications.
But also I can only see half of your face in the way our setup is. And and so I looked over and was captivated by your eyes again. And I had to put it down. Yeah. So did I leave anything out?
I don't think so. It's
no?
like I have a very small life in terms of the things that occupy my time.
You've got other things. You have dogs. You have
but again, like it's a very small life. You know, it's like I have a tiny home. Yeah. I have a husband. I've got a couple dogs, and I have my two hobbies / careers that basically are all of my time.
They're good ones. A couple of things you may have heard Ashley's work on before are Deck the Halls with Matrimony, a wonderful romantic comedy audio drama, and Santa's Husband. The illustrations were done by Ashley, writing by Daniel Kibblesmith, and Princess Dinosaur.
Yeah, which is our follow-up work. Daniel and I worked together again. We made a little book about a dinosaur who was a princess and a princess who was a dinosaur.
You know, the thing actually I was thinking about when we were getting ready to record this was how much Princess Dinosaur sort of encompasses the vibe of this show, actually, of just like be who you want, like who you want to be. You know, I think I was looking at it again, and some of the illustrations in particular of her just kind of moving through this space of toys in a princess dress and seeming like, you know, like what you would expect. Dinosaurs are scary. Like it's too much. There's that element of like, you're too much, but you're not, which I thought was kind of sweet, again, looking at it from that element. So yeah,
it's a good book if you got kids out there.
Even if you don't.
Yeah.
It's a good message. So that's Ashley. So welcome to the show.
Hi.
So today we are talking about, tell us what fandom we're talking about.
All right. Today we're going to talk about John Finnemore.
John Finnemore. And so John Finnemore is an audio drama creator, radio drama, I suppose.
John Finnemore is the radio drama writer, creator. Oh, okay.
Here we go.
Yeah. This is how you know that you have a fan, when they're like, what? Okay, all right, stop. We got to back way up.
It's like when your brain is moving so much faster than your mouth can. And you're just like, wait, well, where do I start?
Yeah. So John Finnemore was the first, correct. All right. Backing up again. Cabin Pressure, which is John Finnemore's radio sitcom, was the first audio drama that I ever really listened to or really got obsessed with as an adult. You know, it's like I certainly had my exposures to radio dramas as a youth, you know, but this was the first one as an adult that I really, really got sucked in and just could not stop listening to it, listened to it many, many times, this series.
Do you remember what the first like radio drama at all you ever listened to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was it was A Christmas Carol, and it was on NPR, and we were driving home from my grandma's house, and I must have been about like maybe 6.
Oh, so you listened with your
5 or 6.
Like your family, like your mom or your dad put it on?
I think it was just on the radio, and it was one of those things where it was like because it was towards the end too, because it was the big dramatic scene. This is the thing: is like most young, most middle-aged millennials now remember from when they were young, like the super high drama of the cartoons of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
you know, really prepared you to become like the melodramatic adults of today. You know, because everything was like life or death stakes, and I think we came into the it was like we were driving home from spending Christmas Eve with my grandma. And it was towards the end of the program, so it was the part where, like, Scrooge is hanging out with, like, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, and you get the great graveyard scene where, you know, like, oh, spirit, tell me what name is on that grave. Tell me if these visions, maybe, are they fixed or maybe they be changed? I'm doing, this is very bad. You get the idea.
I love it.
But, yeah, like, And so, of course, I remember that, and it just, I think that's always, to me, I think is just the greatest moment in A Christmas Carol, and it's so hard to do it justice. I'm somebody who has seen an absurd number of Christmas carols.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I think about A Christmas Carol as like the play that you see every Christmas. Like it's like a play of sort of like a family show. A lot of churches do it. Like it's all the time.
Well, there's a lot of people that do it every single year.
Yeah, there are people who do it every year. Like that's the show.
I actually saw Bradley Whitford do it last year at the Amazon.
Oh, I wanted to see that and it got shut down.
Yeah, it did. It did. It got shut down for COVID. But it was really funny too because so Bradley Whitford, I love you, Bradley. If you're out there, hi. I named one of my episodes of Deck the Halls after you. So, but yeah, Bradley was like fine. He was okay as Scrooge, but where he was great was Scrooge after he's had his life changed. And he's like, ha, 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 get me the goose that's as big as the boy. You know, like that's when he was amazing and it was great. And like they really stretched that part out. It was like it was one of those things where I was in the play and I was checking my watch and I was going like, wow, we got a lot of time left. We're getting pretty close to the end of the ghost here.
Yeah.
No, like they spent like freaking, I want to say like 40 minutes just doing the end of the play when everyone's happy. And I was like, good choice.
Love that.
Very good.
I've never seen a version of it like that. Well, so then did you, when you heard it for the first time, like when you actually heard it on NPR, did you already have at 5 or 6 like a visual idea of A Christmas Carol, or was that your first experience with A Christmas Carol?
It's funny. I honestly don't know. And I must have been a little bit older because I don't think I didn't know what I was listening to.
Okay.
So it must have been at least 6.
Okay.
But I don't think I didn't know what I was listening to.
Yeah. Like, so you had an idea of like,
but it's also kind of like, well, where the heck did I get it from then? Like,
it's interesting because it seems like what I think is interesting too is like the first scene you heard is the scene that sticks with you, but it's the scene you heard, not the scene that you watched.
It's so funny too. It's just like one of those things where it's kind of like the idea of like when did something become a conscious memory is so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I've got this teenage cousin who's in college now, and she is but I was very, very close to her basically from age 4 on.
Okay.
And now that she's sort of getting to be an adult, it's interesting to kind of talk through with her like some of our experience together and sort of find out like things that are for her a very central memory. So it's really interesting to find out sort of what becomes the people's tentpoles. And but just not even that long ago, my parents were making fun of me because I was like, I don't remember what we were talking about. I was recounting some memory that had taken place at the dinner table, and I was talking about our old kitchen chairs, and that were in my memory very tall, straight back chairs. And my parents were like, no, they were just kind of like middle of the back. But it's no, just because I was a tiny
you were so
child.
little, yeah.
Like to me, I remember this being very large, looming chairs that went way overhead. That's my memory of them, and they made fun of me about that for quite a while.
Oh, that's funny. You know, I think because I feel like everyone has that little core memory of like it was so much bigger than I remember. Like mine is when I went to Disney World for the first time. I didn't go to Disneyland. And when you go into the Magic Kingdom at Disney World, you take a boat. It's like you have to like it's like a weird. It's weird. It's over like a water thing. So from the parking lot to Magic Kingdom, you take a boat. At least I hope. I could be.
Oh no! Like I
this.
went once to Disney World when I was again like 7.
Yeah.
So I remember a tram.
Yeah. So you take this boat, and I have this vivid memory of like the castle coming into view and being huge, and that is not how it happens at Disneyland. And so the first time I went to Disneyland, I was like, what is going on? So we have to dive into John Finnemore and Cabin Pressure in particular, because so I listened, obviously, and something that really struck me was I can't believe I never found it as a teenager because I was obsessed with Benedict Cumberbatch.
This is all right. This is my truth.
Give me your origin story. Your villain origin story.
I was way into Benedict Cumberbatch, and it's fine. It's a growth point for many of us. And like I still think he's a wonderful, marvelous actor. And I'm begging you, Benedict, please do another comedy, because if you listen to him in Cabin Pressure, he's got incredible comedic timing.
He's so funny.
He's so funny.
Yeah.
And he's so like, oh my God, did you listen to all of it?
I didn't listen to all of it, so I listened to the whole first season.
I found it after it had already finished airing, and it
Yeah.
was one of those things where it was just kind of out. And
Yeah.
it was like, I bought the series as a whole, and, you just got the series as a whole. And
Right.
except for, like, the last special, Zurich, I don't know if it came out after I had made the purchase or if it was just that I didn't realize it was sold separately and,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Well, also, here's the for everyone listening, what is Cabin Pressure about?
Okay. We're not doing a very good job of starting from the beginning and then going straight to it. So, okay. Cabin Pressure is a ingenious sitcom about a very small charter airline that is owned by a woman who was formerly rich and then was in a marriage with a very rich man, got divorced, and got his plane in the divorce. And she has sort of a daffy son.
Right.
And then she has 2 pilots who fly the plane. And one is played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and he is the captain. He is the thing that's great about his character is that he's actually a very good pilot, but he is wrecked by his nerves constantly.
Right.
So, like, in theory, he's a great pilot because he knows all the rules of the book and he does his flight simulators all the time, but he's so wrecked by his nerves that he is a bad pilot, but, like, so that's kind of the fun of the series is, like, you're watching him actually become a good pilot.
Right.
And then you have Douglas, who is the other pilot, who is the first officer, played by Roger Allam, who has the beautiful, rich, full voice and sounds like a pilot. Like, that's the constant joke of the series is the fact that, like, nobody recognizes Benedict Cumberbatch's character as the pilot. They always defer,
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, so
that's a setup.
That's a great setup, first of all, is like, which something that struck me about it when I was listening to it is I was like, oh, this of course would make a great TV show, but also it's so fun to listen to this type of comedy in audio. Like, it's a single setting, it's very fun, very great comedic timing, very funny, and just in general an enjoyable listen. And a great name also, I thought. But so how did we touched lightly on this, but how did you come to find Cabin Pressure and fall in love?
So I'm someone who needs things to listen to in order to sleep.
Okay.
And I kind of cycle through different things, at the time I was sort of changing up, it's always tough to find the next thing because after a while your brain gets so used to something it doesn't work anymore. So I think I was coming off of the Golden Girls and I was looking for something new. And and I was I was looking around for audiobooks and that kind of thing, and I was looking up narrators of narrators that I particularly like, and it had occurred to me to look for Cumberbatch.
Okay.
Because he's got a beautiful, rich, lovely voice that he should embrace more. Thank you.
Set us the timeline. Is this like Sherlock? Are we at Sherlock time?
We're at Sherlock time.
Okay.
We're mid Sherlock. This is before Sherlock took a turn.
Yeah. So we're like season 1, season 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, that's actually something that's really interesting about this series is that the series 1. Okay, so there are definitely different series because I know this intellectually, like I've heard this in interviews that John Finnemore has done, that when they started doing Cabin Pressure, Benedict was not on Sherlock yet.
Okay.
He was just some guy. He was an actor that they cast.
Okay.
And then he got Sherlock and they started releasing Sherlock. And so at some point during the recordings of Cabin Pressure, the line for the people waiting to get in to listen to a taping of Cabin Pressure, the demographics really shifted.
Oh man.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like most people who got into Benedict Cumberbatch when he was in Sherlock, so I sort of went back through his credits and like found other things found other things to enjoy, like Starter for 10, for example. I forget the name of the show. There was some show he was in who was, I think Hugh Lowry was also in it. So I was like, great, 2 birds with 1 stone.
Okay. I personally, my big unearthed discovery of Benedict Cumberbatch was the biopic that he did of Stephen Hawking for BBC, I think.
Yeah.
It was good.
Oh.
I remember watching it and being like, that was wonderful.
That's the thing. He's a very good actor.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is that you're saying you came in because essentially you're Googling after Sherlock, like the rest of us. How do I consume more Benedict Cumberbatch and you come across a radio drama.
Yeah, and it was, golly, I'm trying to remember. I think it was just one of those things that I found and decided to just jump in with. I don't think I had heard anything about it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't recall ever hearing anything
Well,
about
because I
it.
think what's interesting about it too is it's like, as you mentioned, this is one that you have to buy. It's not
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just out there.
Mhm. And it's just, and it was just one of those things where just very, very quickly realized that the show was something extremely special.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, it doesn't take long to listen to it to realize that.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where I think one of the most special things that can be done, especially with radio comedy, is its company. You know, like that's why people listen to podcasts, especially like the chatty ones where it's like, you know, people sort of jibbing and jabbing and,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. Like, you know, like this is kind of what replaces having friends in like the workplace,
Yeah.
I guess. Um, you know, and that's fine. Like that's one of the reasons that like we listen to a lot of nonfiction podcasts and why we like the ones we like. And that's something that I think is not always fully explored in audio dramas. Is
Mhm.
that like that is I think one of the best things is like when something is good company.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I love the most about this show. It's
Do you think that's because there's like less of a separation between the viewer, so to speak, and the medium? Like with TV, they're showing you exactly, like you can watch Love Island and not necessarily feel as though you were in company of these sexy singles, but listening to a podcast, you feel more you feel more a part of it, right? And I'm wondering if you think that comes from that lack of visual, like you have to imagine it.
to a certain extent, but I think also it's just simply the kind of story, you know, like when you tell stories about friendships,
Mhm.
I think that that's wonderful and valuable. And there are some TV shows that do utilize this very successfully. In fact, the best sitcoms tend to be ones that do sort of bring you into sort of a friend group. When you
Yeah.
think about sitcoms that people really love and that have continued to sort of be rewatched over and over and over, a lot of times that's people might not consciously understand that that's why they're rewatching, but it is the truth. It's like
Right.
you develop these sort of parasocial relationships with these fictitious characters. You feel the effects of their friendship. It's you know, it's terrific.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's and I think this is also sort of the reason why, you know, rom-coms can be watched over and over is that you
Right.
can it is achieving this kind of chemical reaction in your brain. It is making you feel engaged in these positive emotions.
Yeah.
You know, which
Yeah.
artificially, which is, you know, terrific. That is exactly what it's supposed to do.
I do like the idea of like of company, like finding sort of just like you know, feeling lonely and not having to feel lonely, but doing
Mhm.
something that audio specifically oftentimes is something that you would consume by yourself
Mhm.
through headphones. Really, like it's an isolating experience to feel not so alone.
And specifically, this show is exceptional at that because it is taking a situation that is in itself incredibly lonely, which is flying. Flying is lonely and horrible. Like this, I used to listen to cabin pressure on every single flight just because, A, I was a little bit nervous about flying. And there's something about listening to pilots being bored about their jobs that is, to me, incredibly calming.
Yeah.
But it's company in that kind of space. Like that's where most of the hijinks come from in the show you have the sort of forced bonding of being in a small space with a certain number of people
Yeah.
over an extended period of time and having to kind of like engage with them, you know.
Yeah,
It's
I
like, well,
did.
like any workplace comedy, but this is just in a much
But
smaller
it's
space.
even different, even more so, I think. Yeah, because of this the level of you
Mhm.
are inside the cabin of an airplane. Like that is the space that you have. There is nowhere to go. There is no there is no hiding. And so I think there's so much comedy and warmth that gets born out of that,
Mhm.
which I think is nice.
And it's also one of the things that's nice about the show. So John Finnemore's father, I think, was a pilot, and
Okay.
so that was sort of his resource on a lot of this, and sort of where a lot of the influence came from. And there's also like all the flying stuff, and it is correct because
Yeah.
he could go and ask his dad. um, and so John Finnemore plays Arthur Shappy,
Okay.
who is sort of the golden retriever become man, who is the son of Carolyn, who owns the airline, and he is just in the pilot. He has one of my favorite lines, which is like where he's talking about how great flying is, and he's like, like when a plane takes off and goes in the air, and no one knows why. You're just like that incredible wonder of just like no one knows why airplanes fly, and like what's great is everyone's trying to tell him like no, like we know why, but then no one can actually remember how to explain how it works.
When I listened to it, it was interesting. So my grandfather is an aerospace engineer, and he worked on the one that we all fly on. I always put the wrong numbers. I think it's the 747. And so that has always been one of those things where I'm like, oh, I'm fine flying because, if it doesn't work, it's on someone I know. But I do like that element of like, it's like it's so magical. We just don't know how to, like, I thought that line in the pilot was so great, not just because it's a great line, but also because who this person is, like someone who looks at the magic of flight while working on an airline and goes, no one knows how it happens.
Yeah, Arthur's wonder and joy is like it's such great sand play in.
Yeah.
Which sort of leads me to like one of the other things that's really great in the show, and one of the things that John Finnemore is great at, which is games, riddles, puzzles. Golly, I can't remember the name of the book. I sent you this link where he like solved this book riddle.
Oh yes,
that was what like
had never been solved
years?
before.
It had been solved like once before.
Yeah,
and he won like a big cash prize for it. But he's just always been great at puzzles and games and that sort of thing, and that's something that Cabin Pressure has quite a lot of in it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes. Is it? No, golly, it's not Xi'an, but I think it might be. Anyway, I think it's X. Because they letter them by. That's how they organize the series is by alphabet.
Right.
So he had to just find a place name with the first letter for every episode. So I'm pretty sure that's the one that starts with X, but I don't remember exactly where it was. A Chinese. It's the one in China. Like they get frozen on. They end up stuck on the runway overnight, and they have to camp out in the plane. And they play little games to pass the time, and including one of my favorite jokes in the series, which is Fizz Buzz. They try to play the game Fizz Buzz. Arthur has trouble with it, and he's like, well, what if we just, every time you say fizz, someone says buzz? And it's like a very short game, it turns out. So this is a thing that is so incredible about the show. Like one of the hardest things to do in writing is to plant the third act in the first. And he does it every single time, and it drives me crazy. It's like he's so good at it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like if you listen through to all of Cabin Pressure, like they're telling you where they're going. They're telling you the end of the show in the first act every single time. But it's wonderful. He's so clever at planting it and hiding it. It's wonderful. It's just wild. And he was just so creative in managing to continually find these plots to like. He really explored every different little piece of trouble that you could get into with a small airline.
Yeah.
It's great.
So something I'm curious about is, had you already worked in audio drama at this point? This is just pure...
The blush of the thought had never entered my mind.
So what were you up to at the time when you found it?
I was probably drawing comics and writing screenplays.
Okay.
Because I've been doing both of those since like 2010.
Okay.
And it was just sort of with the kind of aimless ambition that young people have. where you're just like, this is the dream and I will do this thing until something works out,
But you had sort of already picked like a solo lifestyle at that point. Like pre-quarantine, that's a work from home space still, like drawing and writing, and especially writing screenplays, like a sort of a time that you would be, what you wanted to do meant you would be by yourself to do it to some degree.
Choosing it makes it sound like it's a very conscious thing,
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like everything I've ever done professionally has been an accident. I probably am, personality-wise, probably more suited to the at-home kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also partly because, like, I moved to Los Angeles kind of late. I missed the wave. Like, if I'd moved to Los Angeles when I was 22, I probably would have gone the route that most people go, which is, assistant work, PA work, that kind of thing, where you just, take a job and you work your way up. But, like, I moved when I was closer to 30.
I think I know this already, but how did you end up in LA?
It was just one of those things where I had been writing for several years, and I was one of those points where I was good enough that I didn't feel embarrassed by my work anymore.
Okay.
And it was kind of an impulse where I told my husband, Paul, I was like, I need to try living in LA just to, because like, it's one of those things where it's like, in order to actually try to be a writer, you have to actually live in the city.
Yeah.
Period.
And you guys were in the Bay Area?
We were in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of like creative people in the Bay Area, but it's just it is very different. It's different environment entirely. Yeah. And I'm glad that we moved to LA, because it was one of those things where it was really nice to like move to an area where I was meeting more people who were sort of in my same industry and like also creatively inclined, as opposed to the Bay, where it's mostly tech people, and if they do creative stuff, it's sort of a side hustle, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Or at least that was my experience,
So I kind of, it's interesting because I feel like what's cool about what you're talking about, sort of with your exploration with Cabin Pressure, and finding something that made you feel kind of less alone almost, or you had company in that space. What I think is really cool about that is you ended up making something that makes people feel that way too.
That was, like, Cabin Pressure was really, it was something where I've talked before when I talk about Deck the Halls that like I don't, again, conscious decision making was not really part of it. It was more like the mad scramble and being like, I guess this will work.
Yeah.
And it was only really kind of looking back on it and like in writing later seasons that sort of realizing that like this was something that we were doing too. It was like trying to create content that made people feel like they had company, like they had friends, that sort of thing, like where you're spending time with people you like.
Yeah.
And Cabin Pressure was just one of those things where, again, it's one of those things where it will always be the bar for me. Like, I have not yet even come close, because John Finnemore is the GOAT, let's be fair. Like, it's not just about creating characters who are really lovable, who really make you feel like you're included. It's not just about having really, really clever plotting structures where, like, the third act is buried in the first. It's not just about, like, incorporating all these clever and true-to-life details about, like, the environment in which you've chosen to set your show. He's also brief. Like, this is where he kicks my ass every single time, is, like, his shows clock in at 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And, like, ooh, boy, baby, he really makes the most of those 30 minutes.
I have to ask you to talk about the rom-com.
Okay. So before I talk about the rom-com, because the rom-com is not like, so, okay, there are,
I love it. That's where I know we've hit something.
There are 3 shows that John Finnemore has done that I have been obsessed with. He's worked on many different shows in the BBC, to be absolutely clear, because he also wrote for the Michelin Web Sound, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember if he also wrote for Michelin Web Look, but he's written a lot. He wrote for The Unbelievable Truth, which is my current favorite thing to fall asleep to. Hi, David Mitchell. You have a very soothing voice. And Cabin Pressure was his sitcom that he had solo, and then but I can't remember if he was already doing John Finnemore Souvenir Program or if that came up concurrently, or if that was after Cabin Pressure. I'm not totally sure, but this is his sketch comedy show.
Okay.
And so I talk about like Cabin Pressure inspired me to do audio dramas, but John Finnemore Souvenir Program is really where I learned how to do audio dramas because they do everything on that show. They do everything because when you're doing sketches, like you can, it leaves a lot of room for invention and for audio dramas, like problem solving.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one of those things because there's like 9 seasons of Souvenir Program. And so if you listen to all of them, I mean, honestly, it's a very comprehensive primer. If you're getting into audio drama, you would not be as unwise to listen to all of those.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they're all fairly straightforward sketch programs, that kind of thing, where, you know, you have like, there are certain ideas that you see him kind of circle around. I'd heard him say in interviews, he talked about how, like, because it's the same cast every year and these wonderful voice actors that he works with and writes for. And he talked about how they would sit around and have a voice day where they would just try out really silly voices.
Okay.
And I think that's genius. And I really, really wish I had like an opportunity to write that way. I think that's fabulous. You know, there was one sketch in particular, Basking Sharks, that he chalks up to that, where it was like came up because, we're doing this voice. We're having a basking shark. You know, it's like that. Yeah. And I think that's just honestly darling. And again, like coming back to how brilliant he is, there's, again, some things he does on that show where it's just like, that's such hard work and you just did it for the credits. He did like, the credits is limericks. Limericks! They're hard! They're so hard! Limericks are so hard and he just did it for the credits. God, and like there's this ongoing sketch called Since You Ask Me where they do it sort of in this sort of they have this cello sting for it that is very draw up your seat to the radio. We're going to have a spooky story hour. And they're not all spooky stories. The storytelling is so creative and it keeps sort of like, you know, changing the genre with that, but it's always great because like you're just like, yes. Those tend to be some of the most heavily designed sketches, like where there's a lot of bells and whistles. And they're always so over the top and goofy, and he keeps managing to top himself in the way that he uses the narrator. Yeah. The narrator is so creative. It's fabulous. But there was one time when he just brought it up because like it's always the last sketch in the show, and there was one time where he had it was like, so you ask me for, of all things, a haiku. Good night. That was it. I was like, you got me again, John. And so I'm going to talk about Double X before I talk about the final season. Okay. Or not the final season, because I don't know if he'll do more, but like the most recent season of John Finnemore Souvenir Program, because it's been different, but it's connected. Okay. All right. So Double X. If being a genius at sitcom wasn't enough, if being a genius at sketch wasn't enough, he had to go and top everything by doing 2 whole seasons. That means 12 episodes of each episode is a totally unique 2-person 30-minute play with a beginning, middle, and end. And okay, like if you have ever written anything, if you've ever written a play ever, you know that two-handers are the hardest to write apart from maybe an entertaining 1-person show. Okay, fair. It's so hard to keep it to 2 people.
I think everyone should know how physical you're getting right now.
If my voice is not an indication. Okay. It's just like, okay, all right. So it's seriously, it's like, they're all different. Yeah. They're all different. It's So I had told Marissa to listen to, if she was going to only listen to one episode of Double X, to listen to the 6th episode in the first season, which is, I believe is called Hot Desk. Is that correct?
Yes, I think you're correct.
And it is a rom-com that he did in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. I have never once, ever accomplished that. I've never accomplished a rom-com in 30 minutes. Once, ever. And it's genius.
Yeah.
Like, all right, now you talk because you actually listened to it.
No, I think it was great because it was just, I think the thing that's crazy about a rom-com is that I, at that point, had never heard anything that could work in less than an hour and a half. Like, the rom-com was 90 minutes for a reason. Like, you go through it and you know it. But this one, you're in it. You're in it, and I don't know how he became so economical with it. Like, I was very jealous. I'm not even going to try to disguise it as something more intellectual. I was jealous.
So the premise for folks at home, hot desk is apparently a term in England, which I didn't know here. Although maybe I would if I had more office jobs.
It's like I've only heard about it from like shared office space where you can get a hot desk, like you share the desk situation.
So it's one of those things where when I started watching W1A, I was like, oh, they're also using the term hot desk. I guess that's a thing that they have.
Yeah.
But again, this is me not having a lot of office jobs. So it's a hot desk. So the premise is you have a business of some kind of corporate building, and there's a receptionist who has that desk during the day and a security guard who has that desk at night.
Yeah.
And the show, the episode is we are witnessing their interactions at the beginning of her workday, the end of his workday, and the end of her workday and the beginning of his workday.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. It's like it has exactly what you look for in a rom-com, which is like, the sort of the little turns that you take when you go from like we're strangers to being like, here, I'm trying to do something nice for you, and then you have sort of the misunderstanding where it's like, oh, okay, we're not actually gonna get along.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what hit me so hard by it was that it does hit every beat of a rom-com somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow in 30 minutes it hits the meet cute, then the like things are working out, then the just kidding, here's the thing that's going to keep us from being together forever, and then it's resolved and now we're together. Like, it's just not to spoil the rom-com.
It's a rom-com, come on.
But it's something as I was listening to it, I realized, I was like, oh, it makes so much sense that Ashley loves this, because it is a perfect emotional, economical space, which I would say after listening to a lot of his work, but especially that one, I do I was like, oh, of course Ashley's a fan. In the same way that like when you find out that someone when you find out that I love Tony Stark, you can be like, yes, a lot of things make sense. But you can really hear the influence. You can hear like that this is what you're after, or this is the feeling you're after.
And I will add that like Cabin Pressure does take a bit of a rom-com turn. It doesn't go full rom-com, but Cumberbatch's character does attempt flirtation a few times to great distress, and by the end of the series does actually succeed, and it's actually very sweet. And
there's something, well, I think like something we've talked about just personally as we've talked about things, but like how a happy ending is so rare these days.
Oh my god, sorry,
no, that's okay, go ahead.
Oh my god. So okay, I have to double back and talk about the ending of Cabin Pressure. I don't want to ruin it for people, but
it's hard.
At the same time, I am in awe.
I think what you can say, because I actually haven't finished it yet, but I'm selfishly, I don't want to know, but okay. I think something that is nice about all of his work, and something that you seem to be very overjoyed about, and then also something that happens in your work as well, often, maybe not always, but often, is that feeling of joy. Mm-hmm. And so like you talked a lot about company, but it's not just company, it's happy company. It's like, it's warmth. It's like a warm blanket and a cup of tea, and like, it's just nice. And there's just not a lot of nice in this world these days, you know?
And the arc that is so rom-commy, but also not rom-commy in Cabin Pressure is the turning of these people who are frustrated by each other to like caring for each other, and kind of looking out for each other in this very nice way. Like, tiny spoiler, but not as important as like the
the ending.
me really, really, really wanting to tell you how it ends, is that, like, of course, you know, like, the whole series is about trying to keep the airline from going under,
Right.
and, Cumberbatch's character wanting to, like, be a real pilot, and, of course, like, the happy ending is going to be a little bit of both, and, like, but how supportive they are of him, like, wanting to look for those opportunities and then giving him advice and trying to nudge him along that way. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it's funny. It's actually funny too because I think, ironically, the early episodes of Sherlock are the same. I mean, and Sherlock Holmes is a tale of his oldest time, but it's that companionship of two people, despite their circumstances or what's going on in the chaos of their life, finding friendship or finding just companionship.
I mean,
with each other.
I think that's why people latched onto it.
Yeah.
And it's, it's one of those things where some showrunners know how to take advantage of that and some don't. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, but so the other thing I wonder too, or not wonder, I kind of know this about you, but like something that I think is really unique about you as a person is how great you are at one-on-one relationships. Like at how well you are able to make someone feel kind of seen and heard and spoken to without it having to be like a group or having to be like, you're very good at come over for dinner or sit here and watch this TV show with me or whatever. Just like,
oh, you mean in real life?
Yeah, in real life. Oh, I think you're good in your work as well. But I meant in real life, which I think translates to your work as well. But I think there's something like there's something really nice about that core joy and that core understanding of what people need in a relationship and how that can translate into both clearly something that you love and also something that you make. And so I just think not even a question, just an observation of I think like joy is something that gets so it's not the type of thing that gets awards or gets big expectations from or big names or big this or big that, but like the studio rom-com was a big deal for a reason. Like Ryan Reynolds, I love you, the best work you've ever done was The Proposal.
Hollywood used to this used to be part of the process. Like if you were a new star, that was how you built up audience goodwill. And for a reason, and I think it honestly should come back anyway. I'll talk a little bit more about Double Axe because there's so many of the episodes that I really love. I think English for Pony Lovers is another classic favorite. It's interesting. I think a lot of my favorite ones cut real deep.
Okay.
There's a lot of these episodes have a very core emotional struggle that is happening. There's like one episode, I think it's something about Goliath. Because they talk about a lot about David Goliath, and there's a window involved. Anyway, but it's like two brothers who are kind of trying to come to terms again. English for Pony Lovers is very much a mother-daughter thing, but it's not actually a mother and daughter speaking.
Okay.
It's two strangers.
Oh, okay.
It's a German woman who has hired this dumb, English kid to like give her English lessons. And it's because the mother is trying to connect more with her daughter who writes fan fiction in English. And the mother is trying to read this stuff. Whereas the girl, she's meant to be on gap year, and then she kind of panicked and bailed out, and it kind of has been. And it's great because they actually end up giving each other very valuable advice at the end. But the way that they are relating to each other, first it's as strangers, but then it kind of turns into this sort of like very genial, we are connecting the way of a mother and daughter a little bit.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, I talked in the other podcast that we did at great length about the Queen's speech that is
Yes,
season 2,
did.
episode 1. And it's really beautiful. It's like he just manages to unearth these very human moments. And, again, it's just like in Cabin Pressure where you never see the third act coming, where he plants them. And if you knew to look for them, they're there. But like he's so brilliant at pivoting and revealing it to you.
Yeah.
And just for the record, Queen's speech makes me cry every single time I listen to it when you get to the final pivot. Every single time. And in fact, in the other podcast where we were talking about it, I started to choke up a little bit when I was talking about it. And that is not by accident. That is because every single time that I listen to that show, I cry.
Yeah.
Because it's something that is... such a simple and fundamental truth.
Yeah.
You know, um, it's really beautiful, and like that, you know, but they're all so unique and fascinating, and so it's one of those things where it's like a chocolate box. You're going to find something in there, a 2-person play that really connects with you in some way,
Yeah.
and it's going to be different for everybody. And it's just, Jesus Christ, man, like how can you be this good? How can you be this good? And anyway,
No, I love it.
so that's Double Axe. But then let's come back and talk about the most recent season of John Finnemore Souvenir Program, which, by the way, is still, as of this recording, I don't know when this is going to come out, but it's still available on the BBC Sounds app. So
Okay.
if you like open the BBC Sounds app and search John Finnemore, you're going to find John Finnemore Souvenir Program, and you can listen to the entire 9th season.
Okay.
Now, and he warned people when it came out that this was going to be very different than his other John Finnemore Souvenir programs, because it's not silly sketches the way it used to be.
Mhm.
It is still vignettes,
Okay.
sort of sketchy. And he still does the whole, so you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's done in season 9, the best way to explain it is that he has created an oral family tree, and he is moving sort of backwards in time through it.
Okay.
And what he creates, it takes, like, I would say 2 episodes to get the hang of what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people it's like when they were promoting the season, they kept saying, like, please just listen to 2 episodes at least, because the first episode you're going to feel a little in over your head.
Okay.
If you listen to the whole thing, he creates the feeling of nostalgia from scratch. So it's like how we talked about in Cabin Pressure, creating the feeling of friendship through fiction. Nostalgia. He makes you feel nostalgic for this family he has invented. It is insane. It is, man.
I love listening to you talk about it, because I like this idea of, like, each piece of work that he's made that's affected you comes down to a feeling, like one specific feeling.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I think when you talk about fiction, it's about a plot moment, or this really cool thing that they did, or this really cool acting moment, or those different things that make you connect with it. But every way you talk about John Finnemore's work, it comes down to a feeling, like this made you feel what friendship makes you feel.
See, I don't know if that's because I just love his work so much, or if it's because that is what his gift is creating human emotions through, it's like impressionist.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you go and look at a Monet, and, you know, except he's way more precise than that.
But I think something that's interesting, though, about your journey with John Finnemore is that you got there. This could have been a whole episode about Benedict Cumberbatch, like you said, but instead it's something that you came over and you didn't stay because of Benedict. You stayed because of the writing. But even though John Finnemore's in Cabin Pressure, obviously, like, the thing that is you're connecting to is that writing and that feeling. Anyway, I think what's interesting about it is that when you're trying to parse out, is it because I love it or because it's so well done? Like, I think the fact that you came for Benedict Cumberbatch and you stayed for the writing feels like it is something that's sort of like bottled magic. And I think what's wonderful about it too is that it's audio. Like, it's not. In my opinion, I think audio is so hard to get it right, and especially to get that feeling right, and also to capture your attention. And that's the other thing that I think is interesting about what makes you so connected to this piece, is that you were looking for something to fall asleep to, which to some degree should be something that like I rewatch Archer to go to bed. And it's because I know everything that's going to happen, and it's fine, and it's funny, and it's soothing to me, but I couldn't watch something new to fall asleep, right?
I
Because
saw
would wanna know
somebody
what
joke
happens.
that, like, that it's, you know, it's kind of sounds like an insult if someone says they use your podcast to fall asleep, but actually it's like basically saying, I feel comfortable letting you play hacky sack with my subconscious.
Yeah,
You know?
I like that. No, I think there's something really intimate about it. One, that, like, it worms its way into your subconscious, right? Because you're falling asleep to it to some degree. But then on top of that, when you wake up, you must go back and listen to the rest of it. Like, you return, you're like, I need to know what happened. And there's something almost like bedtime story about it. There's something lovely about going back to something that feels so safe, like your parents telling you a bedtime story before you go to bed.
And to be clear, like as soon as I got into Cabin Pressure, it was not going to sleep, my going to sleep podcast immediately. Like it just became the thing that I listened to like on planes when I was drawing, that sort of thing. And yeah, I did eventually start falling asleep to it, but like
but I do love that it grabbed you enough to take you away from something that's what you were looking for something calm and kind of in the background, to instead now it's I can't stop moving my body when I talk about it. It's so good.
It's funny. It's like I'm jumping back again, but I just keep thinking about one of my other favorite episodes in Cabin Pressure. Again, like it's so unusual because I mentioned that I enjoyed it partly because like it really eased a lot of my anxiety about flying. And one of my favorite episodes actually is the one where they have a bird hit. Like, and they have to take an emergency landing, and it's like very stressful in the moment, beautifully acted.
And you
like,
listen to this on airplanes.
Like, yes,
like let me listen to a crisis that could happen.
Honestly, truly, it's like again, it's like hearing people. There's something very reassuring about like they encountered a terrible time and they came out okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, it's been really fascinating to hear John Finnemore's work grow and it's one of those things where like I don't know the man like, and he doesn't do a lot of interviews, but it's one of those things where you kind of listen and you sort of parse things out from hearing the way his work grows and sort of the things that he does, and like I feel definitely like you can sense him hitting his head on the ceiling occasionally and then growing past it, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, and she's like drinking from the bottle that says drink me, and like her head pops through the roof or something like that. And like I think he actually I think he took a break from writing for radio because he was doing some TV, because I think I know he was on the show Avenue 5. I can't remember if he was writing for it or not.
Great show. Very fun.
And yeah, I think I've heard that he's done some more TV writing lately. Which is one of those things where it's like, yeah, good for him. He absolutely should go get that money. Because Lord knows that doing audio doesn't pay the bills.
Ashley, don't dash my dreams.
But it's one of those things where it's like he's such a brilliant writer. He could do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's absolutely the person I'm the biggest fan of. Like every single thing I've ever heard him do, I've been blown away by. I would probably argue his least effort is so far above our heads.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things I wanted to mention is Cabin Fever. So when we talk about people who just seem like they've got good vibes.
Yeah.
Again, I've never met John Finnemore. I've never had a conversation with him. I would love to someday. They say don't meet your heroes, but I do wish. Because by all accounts, he seems to be a really good dude.
Yeah.
And people seem to really appreciate him and love working with him. But so during quarantine, he did this YouTube series called Cabin Fever, where he was reprising his role as Arthur Shappy from Cabin Pressure. And he just did it in his granny flat and was basically being like, I'm Arthur, and just, I can't remember how many of them he did, but he did them for quite a while. And I was like, it was just such a gift. It was such a kind thing to do.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where like most people who tried to be creative during the pandemic, like the first efforts at being creative were terrible and were just all about the pandemic and very stressful to like consume. Like, there's a reason why a lot of theater companies were like, please, no COVID plays.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that reminds me of is, did you watch Staged with David Tennant and Michael Sheen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there was something warm and lovely about that as well. That was just like, I'm losing my mind just as much as you are. And I was like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you so much for acknowledging that.
But I think that's why this was so special, was because that's what's so special about this character is Arthur Shappy was never the kind of person who could be truly brought to the same concerns of the outside world. He's just totally blissfully unaware. And so it was this lovely vacation where he was just talking about I think episode 3, because I was rewatching some of them.
Yeah.
And he was talking about like having seen a mouse. Like in the first couple episodes, he talks about having seen a mouse, and his mother tells him he can't keep the mouse, and like he's not allowed to name the mouse because then he'll treat it as a pet.
Of course.
And sometimes when he's seen the mouse, it's brown, and sometimes when he saw the mouse, it's gray. And so like people in the he invited people to in the comments name the mouse, because he was like, to be clear, I think it would be okay if you name the mouse, not me, because then it's not me naming the mouse.
But he can have a name.
Yeah. And
that's lovely.
It's so lovely. It's so
Yeah.
darling. And of course it brought up one of his best things, which is, puzzles and riddles.
Yeah.
So he like as the thing went on, he kept making up like riddles and puzzles and that kind of thing. And it was just like they got too hard for me really fast.
Okay, I think on that lovely note, I'm going to ask you my last question that I'm asking everybody. If you had never encountered John Finnemore's work, what about you or who you are now would be different?
Oh, well, the biggest thing that would be different, I probably wouldn't be doing podcasts. It would not even, I don't think it would have even occurred to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would be doing. Probably trying to draw my way through a self-published graphic novel, something like that. Yeah, it never even would have occurred to me.
Yeah. So this one thing that you do very, very well, you just simply never would have done.
Simply never would have done. It would not have occurred to me.
Well, thank you, John Finnemore, for bringing joy to the world in very, very many ways. Yeah, I think there's something lovely about that. Like someone putting something so nice out into the world that it makes you find something that you're that good at as well. Because if you're listening and have not listened to Deck the Halls, the feeling that we're talking about of just feeling like you're around good people and in company and not so alone, I get that from Deck the Halls so deeply. So I think there's something really, really wonderful about that coming from feeling that way of someone else's work. And I would be devastated if it didn't exist. So, and to some degree, I wouldn't know you. So I think John Finnemore and I owe you a drink. I
have to tell you this one more thing.
Yeah,
it is my great shame, even greater than the Benedict Cumberbatch thing. So,
there's no shame on this podcast. Actually, that's the point.
I felt shamed. So, this was like late last year after season 9 had come out of John Finnemore's Souvenir Program. And like some of his fans got together to got him to come on a Zoom to talk about season 9, which it was like on English time, and I was like, oh no. And also I was like on deadline at the time. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, it would be like at I don't know, 3:00 in the morning. I can't tell. But the thing is, to request an invite to the Zoom, you also had to answer a question. And I was on such a deadline crunch. I had not listened to the season yet. So I didn't. So I answered the wrong answer, and they denied me admission to the Zoom. I was not allowed to come because I did not count as a fan.
What?
I know. It's my great show. I was so embarrassed. I was like, that.
I hate that.
So it's like,
this was like a fan-made thing? Like a fan?
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
I know. And it's fine, because honestly, it's like I would have had to wake up really crazy early in the morning, and I didn't have time, but my heart wanted to.
Oh, that's devastating.
It's like on YouTube, and I haven't actually gotten around to watching it yet because my heart is still ashamed of the fact that I got and I know the answer to the question now, because
crazy.
The question was the question was, if you get a paper hat, what do you do with it?
Right.
Tear it up is the answer according to his show. But I was put it on because I had not listened to the show yet.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I don't love a gatekeep. I don't love a gatekeep. But
it's okay. I'm sure I don't know. I'm sure it was to try to keep the Zoom to a manageable number of people. Yeah, I will forgive them. I will tip the hat. But still, it it hurt my pride so bad because like I said, I'm such a fan, and he's like the one person where I have almost started a fan letter to him many, many, many times.
Oof.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to put it on this podcast, but I have sent one, and it is not to who you would think. And I hope no one ever finds out that I sent it.
I don't think it's a bad thing to send fan letters.
This one was quite specific. But that's for me to know. That's for me to know, and this person, if they manage their inbox on their own, to know forever. and take to the grave. Don't release this information. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank
I
you
really
for
had a
having
lot
me.
of fun. I had a lot of fun learning these things and knowing that if it weren't for John Finnemore, I would not have someone very lovely in my life. So I think that's very. I guess should I tell how we met? I don't even think that's in here. I'm gonna tell it because I
Sure.
think it's relevant to everything that that we've talked about actually. So Ashley and I met at the Austin Film Festival in 2017.
Mhm.
Unbeknownst to you at the time, I was in the awful period of time that happens right after you graduate college and get your first real job,
Mhm.
and find out that things are not what you thought they were going to be,
Tough times.
and that adults are not who you hope they would be.
They don't always know what they're doing.
Yeah, it seems that that's the case. And I think I just remember feeling like I just did not fit in again. Like it felt like being in middle school again. And just being a fish out of water. And I got into the Austin Film Festival and I thought, I'll go. And so I went and there was an audio drama track that was
It was brand new.
I found out, this is how I found out about audio drama actually. I had never heard of it. I had submitted for the TV section, the TV script part of the festival. And then they had, after you submitted and you paid your fee and you did your whole thing, they had a marketing email that came out that said, so glad you submitted for the TV part. Just so you know, that part is super competitive. And we have this other new track that we would recommend submitting for if you have anything that would fit. It's a fiction podcast competition. I am paraphrasing and all of that, but I remember getting this email. And I was like, what is a fiction podcast? I actually, and the thing that's crazy about it is at that time I was listening to a lot of talk show podcasts because my commute to work was an hour and a half each way every day in Los Angeles traffic. And I had gotten to the point that I would listen to a podcast on the way to work, get to work so early to try to beat some of the traffic that I was then in the office by myself for about an hour, and I would listen to a podcast at that point as well because it's creepy to be in a office by yourself.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to a ton of podcasts, but I was like, what is a fiction podcast? And so then I looked into it and I was like, oh, I have something. And, I figured something out, which then became super ordinary. But submitted it and got into the fiction podcast track. And so I was kind of splitting my time between the TV track and the fiction podcast track. And you and I met at a little mixer. And I just remember having felt so overwhelmed by how many people I had met and how the first thing everyone asked you was, how where'd you place? And it was so weird. And so I went to this, and also like, I don't even remember. I don't care. Like, but the thing everyone knew they had in common was they were in the same competition. And so that was like always the start. Like, what's the log line? What's whatever. And I met you and you were just like, where are you from? And there was,
like a normal human being.
A normal human being. And I don't take it as like anybody being so horrible. I think it's when you put a bunch of writers in a room for a weekend.
Let's also clarify that this is the Austin Film Fest, and a lot of people that go are not from LA.
Exactly.
And so these are people that are really pumped up to be at their very first film festival where they're feeling like they're part of something.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, all the stuff that gets trained out of you after living in Los Angeles for 6 months.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, so I had an amazing time at the Austin Film Festival. And I realize now that I may have made it sound as though I was having a miserable time.
Oh, no. The Austin Film Festival is super fun.
Yeah. So fun.
Yeah.
And I had met a ton of really great people. It was just that every conversation had started and eventually got to a place where it was wonderful to have the conversation. But every conversation had started with like, what did you submit? What was it about? And at that point I had said so many times, like the little log line of my script that I felt like I was.
Well, no, it was the same with me. Like, I don't know if you remember. So the part of the horrible prize that you win if you place high enough in this competition is that you get to pitch in front of a room full of people. It's awful. I hate it. I don't want it. That shouldn't be. No.
Yeah.
Why? Well, it ruins the weekend. It's a fun weekend. It's like it's supposed to be like camp. It's like camp until you have to do that thing.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's like, Because the audio is the only thing I ever placed high enough to actually have to do that.
Pitch, yeah.
But there's also like a pitch contest, and I did have placed high enough to have to do it there one time, and it's awful. Don't do it.
I enjoyed myself, but I do understand what you're feeling.
No, my God, it's worse. It's like the worst. It's oh God, it's so bad. I hate talking in front of people, and it's even worse when you have to be fast and to be compelling.
3 minutes.
For like the pitch fest, it's like 90 seconds.
90 seconds,
And I remember at the end of it, like the note that I got from Lindsay Dorn, who I adore and admire, was she was like, it was a little hard to understand the tone because I was so high energy and I was describing a tragedy. It's kind of like when you get ready to tell someone about a murder and you're like, I heard about this murder. Guess what? And you're like, okay, bring it down.
Bring it down.
Yeah. But what was really funny because so I had to I had to do the whole pitch thing in front of a room full of people. And again, every single conversation starts with like, tell me your pitch, whatever. But instead of talking about the project I was there for with the contest, I was just mostly pitching Deck the Halls. Because I think we had the first one out and we were getting ready to do the second season. We were getting ready to release the second season.
Yeah, I think that's right because I won't skip. I won't skip ahead, but you definitely had one season out at that point.
So, oh gosh, but yeah, but it was so funny because everyone had heard that so many times, and so I mentioned that in sort of the preamble of who I was, and it got a big laugh. And again, you're on a timer, so I had to wave for silence, and that was somehow even funnier. Yeah. And honestly, it's one of my best crowd work moments.
Yeah. I believe I was in that room actually.
No, you absolutely were.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, because I remember the wave. And I remember just being like, oh man, she's got everybody eating out of the palm of her hand, just right at the top.
And it's honest. It's just, it paid off that I skipped the closing night party to prepare for that. But I hate that I skipped that party.
Well, I do remember it because I remember, and ironically, I guess, I think it'll be kind of what we're going to talk about with John Finnemore and your work and how it all ties together. But I remember leaving the Austin Film Festival, and the first show I did listen to out of all the people I met was Deck the Halls. And I think the reason why I did was because I had felt that same warmth from you as a person, just in general. And there's something really lovely. I would say I am generally a pretty outgoing and social person. But I think there's something so easy about meeting certain people that make you feel just make you feel comfortable, just make you feel here is a very uncomfortable situation and it's nice to meet you, let's chat. And I had a lovely time, and I got on the plane and I pulled up Deck the Halls. I had downloaded it before I got on the plane, and I sobbed on the plane. I cried like a friggin' baby. The man sitting next to me was horrified. It is a short flight from Austin to Los Angeles.
Thank God it's a short flight.
But it is long enough to listen to the first season, and I cried, and I remember just feeling like I had left this week of being overwhelmed by being around people, of having so much to do, and I was going back to I was leaving something that felt amazing to go back to something that didn't feel so amazing. And I was listening to this show, and I ended up crying. It was a rom-com. It's very happy. It wasn't, but it's the moment where you're supposed to cry. I cried. And I remember feeling so wonderfully overwhelmed by it. And also just feeling, like you said, just feeling like I had company. And so what I think has been really wonderful listening to you talk about him today is just that same warmth and sort of companionship that you talk about finding in his work is something that people find in your work now. So I think that's really lovely. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to John Finnemore for giving me one of my favorite people in the world. We will be back next week with Daniel Kibblesmith, one of Ashley's writing partners. We mentioned him earlier in this episode. He's written for Marvel. He has a new issue out right now. And you can hear more about what made him who he is next week. Until then, you can join me on Twitter at Marissa Kumari, at our website, tandonproductions.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, which is always issued with every episode of this podcast. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.